Okay, now I'm going to speak about prosody of focus, and it is our preliminary results of our research. So I'm going to speak about the prosody of focus in the Altai language. Altai is a Turkic language spoken officially in the Altai Republic, Russian Federation. This language was called Orod in the last century. Together with Russian, Altai is an official language of the Altai Republic. Due to the isolated position of the Altai Mountains and contact with surrounding Aboriginal languages, the classification of Altai within the Turkic languages has often been discussed. However, due to certain linguistic similarities with Kyrgyz, it has been grouped with the Kipchak languages within the Turkic language family. There are some dialects of the Altai language. They are mostly divided into southern and northern groups. Genetically, they belong to different branches of the Turkic language. The first writing system for Altai was invented by missionaries from the Altai spiritual mission in the 1840s. It was based on the Cyrillic alphabet and invented for the Telud dialect and was used mostly for church publications. In these first studies of Altai performed by missionaries, it was discussed that the Altai utterance has the fixed word order, subject, object, predicate, in contrast to the Russian one. In our research, it was suggested that the focus of the utterance is expressed by the certain intonation features different from that of the topic. The topic is the core point of the message with something to be stated about. The topic corresponds to the logical subject of the proposition, while the focus is rather new or contrastive information that was stated or asked about. The focus contains new information and has the highest degree of communicative dynamism, but the completeness of information, or so-called giveness, is created by a dynamic combination of the focus and topic. We could assume that the intonation control of the focus differs from that of the topic, and speech production, being dependent on the sentence information structure, is quite predictable. And it may be characterized as a topic intonation or the focus intonation. The material under study is a simple two-part and simple one in complex sentences statement with the topic and focus. For each sentence, depending on the context, it is decided separately how the focus is presented verbally and tonally in the utterance. Audio recordings of Altai fairy tale and non-fairy tale prose fragments produced by 4 native speakers were listened to. Then utterances were selected for analysis. In the Audacity program, the sound signals were cut into separate utterances of the declarative communicative type. The resulting files were placed in the Praat program at several levels, but the material 100 simple statements was analyzed only at the syllabic sublevel. Now consider some sample of phrases to be analyzed pronounced by 4 native Altai speakers. Okay. This sentence is simple. Between the group of the subject, which includes the adverbial, the subject, and the attribute, and the predicate, we find a physical pause. The first intonation phrase, the group of the subject, MDQ, has a rise-fall pitch movement. The maximum of pitch is on the second syllable of the adverbial MD here. And on the verb, the pitch is generally loud. An unexpectedly high F0 value appears on the final syllable of the predicate. Perhaps it occurs as a result of drawing the listener's attention to what the narration will be about further. That is, the predicate is focused on the utterance. This sentence begins with the conjunction te, but in the sentence there is a lexical repetition of the adverbal mandala here. The intonation contour is not stable. There are two F0 maxima occurred in both cases of the adverbal mandala here. In the first case of the word mandala here, the pitch increases, then decreases. On the repeated word, the pitch decreases from the high F0 value to low one in the utterance, reaching the lowest F0 value on the predicate in the final position of the sentence. Thus, the focus can be expressed not only by nuclear accent or raising pitch, but also by pitch movements, that is, from relatively high to minimal ones. This finding is consistent with the idea of Robert Ladder that the pitch increases are functional and may convey focus, and they are significant not only as individual components of intonation out of context, but as a part of the global rise-fall contour of an utterance. Here in this sentence, the compound conjunction onen uchun thus is found, and together with the verbal word dep, having said, they may be referred to metatextual linkers. Being emphasized with the maximum pitch value, these contextual words realize the so-called corrective focus of the utterance. On the verb ada, to give name, we can observe a declining F0 contour, which has the minimum pitch value at the end of the utterance. It is interesting that not only the F0 maximum, but intensity peak is realized on the verbal word dep, having said as well. This metatextual linker, dep, originating from participial form of the verb de, to say in folk texts, often performs the function of strengthening declarativeness of statements, according to Tebykova, the author of research on the syntax of Altai language written in Russian. In this sentence, the global pitch contour is rise-fall. The minimum pitch value is found on the first syllable of the attribute Agalu Nilu, older and younger, followed by the maximum pitch value realizing on the syllable of the same word. Then we can see slight pitch rising on the attribute eq too, and again pitch rising is observed on the semantic verb turtagan, lived, and on the auxiliary verb boltir, were. There is a pitch downdrift. There are two peaks of intensity in the utterance, on the attribute agalu nilu, older and younger, and on the verb forms, both semantic and auxiliary. So here the focus is expressed not only by pitch movements, but by increasing intensity as well. The global contour of the utterance is characterized to be a rise-fall, as in the previous sample. Pitch and intensity maxima are found on the third syllable of the attribute by that. Here it is. The second intensity peak is observed on the final syllable of the verb uttergan, set. Okay. However, pitch is declining here, so the parameters of intensity and pitch do not synchronize in this case, which is more typical not for Altai, but for the Telud, relative to Altai. The repetition of the same word is one of the fundamental features of the oral folk art. Repeated elements are highlighted tonally, usually by raising the pitch. Sorry. Here the pitch peaks are found on the words akandi of brother, the first part of the predicate azıktap tuluktep having supplied and the adverbial kanay kanay somehow, and declining pitch moments are observed on the second part of the predicate azıktap tuluktep having supplied on the predicate tianderi ris will send and the verb dep having said, which functions as a metatextual marker in folk texts highlighting direct speech. Thus, in the Altai language, the restful intonation contour is mainly observed in declarative utterances. In simple statement characterized by the standard Altaic word order, subject, object, predicate, the intonation declines on the predicate when realizing the topic of the utterance. The focus of the utterance may be expressed by pitch and intensity peak, or pitch movement from high value to low one, on the syllable of the emphasized word of the utterance. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Would you please go back to your resources or your references page? I needed to look again.
Yes, of course.
Oh, thank you very much. I enjoyed your presentation thoroughly. I just wanted to look at your references.
Are there any questions?
Yes, I'd like.
Sure, Mr.
I'd like to put a question. If there is somebody else.
No.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I really appreciated. I would like to ask you, I didn't pay quite attention, the material, what type of material was it?
It was folk texts. Native speakers of Altai Kizhi were producing these texts. They are just their native fairy tales that they know from their childhood. And they were recorded by a special group of people who study folk texts, and they shared with us, and we just studied the phonetic features of their speech.
I would suggest the following. I assume that this language has not been studying enough, and well, your approach has its advantages, but I would say from your pitch contours, tonal contours I saw, there was a lot of voiceless consonants which disturbed the F0 contour, and you can't really see what is going on. I mean to say, it might be better, yes, in many cases, it might be better to, in order to get some basic knowledge of this language, to set up specific materials with specific questions like focus, and if you chose nasal and vowels like nana, mama, la, very simple questions, and you put focus on, so that you observe the whole tonal contour. And once you have acquired basic knowledge and seen what is going on, then you can go to more complicated texts or spontaneous speech and so forth. So I would say simple sentences with variable focus or sentence type, play with this material so that you get the basic intonation patterns of the language. You publish them, and then you go to more complicated structures and then to this type of material, because this type of material, you get a picture, you get an idea, but it's a lot of information which is missing. Start slow and then go faster. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Marco, do you want to ask something?
Yes. Yes. In the opposite direction, I was wondering whether you have some notion of what happens if the focus constituent is a compound word, either a syntactic or a morphological compound, like with at least 2 tone-bearing units, if you have data of this kind in your corpus.
Do you mean that considering compound words, which part of the word is the most stressed?
Yeah, or a compound expression.
Mm-hmm.
Like instead of, for instance, in this, what is the focus constituent in this sentence that appears here? I can't quite realize, sorry.
Thank you very much for the question. It's maybe too complicated for me now. I will think about.
Yeah, no, okay, but also you have said that you have a fall on the focus constituent, right?
Yes,
So if it is a longer one, just try to pay attention to what happens in all stress-bearing units. Okay.
I might just suggest that maybe the whole word, the whole compound word may be focused. Maybe this
Yes.
focus is just broadened here.
Yeah, it's broad, but only on like 2 or 3 tone-bearing units, or like a phrase. It's an intermediate. Say intermediate is like prosody, but like a phrase, a noun phrase, a complex noun phrase. You know, branched noun phrase.
Actually, yes, I have noticed that some words I realized as if they are short utterances inside the longer one. They are just overlaid more global utterance, global pitch contour.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions?
If I may ask
Sure.
a short question, I was wondering about the participants and whether there has been any variation. I'm afraid I've missed the point about the number of participants, and I think there were 4 of them, if I remember correctly, right? So my question basically is whether you've observed a homogeneous pattern, whether all their productions were very similar, or whether you had to do something about differences. So were there any differences in the expression of this focus?
Actually, I had to concentrate more on similarities because, yes, there were individual features of their voices, of their production, of one and the same or likely phrases, but I had to omit them. But I collect it in my base. Maybe I will consider it later. Just not similarities, but different features of just these four speakers, because it is a very interesting topic as well. But now describing just our preliminaries to describe the Altai intonation, because it wasn't described yet.
Sure.
We focus on just similarities, but of course they are individual.
What I mean is there are many languages which have different ways of expressing focus, and depending on the on the speaker's intention, what they may use different patterns. So I've been wondering whether you've observed maybe different patterns, or if they were all very much the same word in expressing this type of focus. But I understand that the number of speakers is rather small, right, to draw any type of generalization. So I agree with the previous speaker. So maybe this is a good way to start, right, just from very small chunks, right, and then to enlarge the study, which is